Hello and welcome again to another issue of Neighbors and Friends. We are here today with Ellen Krug, and you know that we have interviewed several gays and lesbians. We've interviewed 3 clergy people who are supportive of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people. We've interviewed several lesbians, some couples, and we've interviewed some gay men and a couple of allies. And today we're introducing to our public a transgender person. Ellen, would you tell us something about your life, your being transgendered?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I am 53 years old, grew up for the most part in Iowa, went to college here, and went then to law school on the East Coast and lived out there for a while. I got married, and like a lot of transgender people, I really started out with a very basic boy's life, very much so, to the point where I married my high school sweetheart, fell in love with her, and we stayed married for 22 years after that. Had 2 children, and both of my daughters are, they're adopted, but you know, whatever, they're my children, and I only raised that because we had to go through several hoops in order to adopt, and part of that process of dealing with the adoptions was I knew that if I disclosed that I had some gender identity issues, the adoptions would never have been able to happen. So much of my life, and I'm sure that you have questions to ask me, but much of my life has been about being a boy and then finally coming to grips with really who I am.
So, at about what age did you start to come to grips with it?
Oh, well, let's see, when was last week? No, you know, I knew even when I was 10 or 11 years old. I mean, I started wearing girls' underwear, and I vividly remember an incident where I had, you know, a top and a bottom on underneath my Boy Scout outfit, where I went to a Boy Scout meeting, and then I knew that certainly I was different. I didn't know how different at that time, but I knew it was not probably what my friends were doing. And I started to explore a little bit in terms of literature. Now remember, this is pre-internet, so I remember a Life magazine story about Christine Jorgensen, the very first transgender, transsexual. And I remember reading that saying, this is something I need to pay attention to. And so from then on, I just tried to deal with it, thinking that it was not something that was significant. And I went on with my life as a boy. You know, I played football, I was a jock, all the while showing up to school wearing girls' underwear. My wife and I were high school sweethearts, and I tried to tell her once about this when we were in high school, and she got very anxious about it, and that, if there was ever any question in my mind, that told me that this is something you don't share with anyone. And all the while, I just thought that it would go away. So, and you know, I thought it would go away when I got married. It didn't. I thought it would go away when I had children, and it didn't. I thought it would go away as I got older and established myself in my law career, and it didn't. You know, and so for me the defining moment was September 11. when that occurred, because I had been fighting myself for a very long time, and on September 11th, 2 of the airplanes were out of Boston, and they were early morning flights across the country. And when I had lived in Boston, I had taken early morning flights across the country. And that night I was in church, just like most of America, crying for our country. But suddenly I started to think about me being on one of those airplanes. And I thought about dying and not being me. And I just, for the very first time, I started praying for myself. And I just said that night, on 9/11 night, I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done hiding. I'm done cheating myself. It's time to face everything, even though I knew that it would hurt so many people that I loved. I loved my wife, and we had a great marriage. And I did not want to leave it, but
you wanted to be yourself.
I had to be myself.
Right.
In order to survive.
Right.
So, now that came after a lot of therapy as well. I mean, I started therapy in 1993. And by that point, by 2001, I'd been through 2 therapists already, both of whom had told me that I needed to leave my marriage in order to be who I was. And I fired both of those therapists because I really loved my wife and I loved my family, and I did not want to leave them.
Right. It's a struggle. It's a real struggle.
It was. Very much so.
So, and the pity is that you mentioned church. And I know for a fact that every denomination out there, from Catholic to Episcopal, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, Mormon, every group going has a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender support group. And they turn out terrific information, terrific resources. I know because I turned to almost all of them to keep my soul alive. And there is remarkable, and in the last several months, all of them have done more work on the transgender topic.
Oh, that's great.
And just Google LGBT and put in the name of your denomination, and I'm certain you'll get it up on Google.
Well, the problem, of course, with being transgender, and this is a problem different from the rest of the LGBT alphabet, is that, you can be gay, but your appearance doesn't change.
Right.
And you can be gay, and you can essentially, once people realize this is what the story is, and assuming they're accepting, you don't have to move, you don't have to change anything about your life. Transgender is different because we do have to change our appearance. And I think when that occurs, for many people, not for everyone, but for many people, it is very, very difficult. I call it the ghost. My old ghost is, the ghost of who I was as a boy is kind of like always behind me. And my good friends and relatives, for some of them, that's all they see. And seeing me as Ellen is very, very difficult for them. And I have lost people as a result of that.
Yes.
And with the church, to go back to what you started talking about, I think it's exceedingly difficult, at least for the Catholic Church where I was raised. I think it's exceedingly difficult for them to accept anybody that really sort of breaks the norm, because, of course, His Holiness the Pope himself has called transgender as, I don't think he used the word abomination, but certainly that was the reaction I had when he talked about it, because, of course, we're diverting from what physical body, we were born with. And of course, I don't think the church likes that. So, I mean, and I, in turn, for my religious journey, I mean, I became a Buddhist, which I found to be far more accepting, and, you know, it's certainly a way of living your life, a way of a philosophy about life that really helped me deal with a lot of fears associated with being transgender.
That's interesting because in the research I was doing, I came up with a Google search, resources for transgender persons. So here I have a couple pages which are the first out of 126,000 sightings.
Oh my goodness, great.
And another one under just the word transgender, 7,180,000.
Well, we're getting around.
And I also came up with the fact that it is interesting you mentioned the comfort you found in the Buddhist faith. Mm-hmm. Other resources led me to the definition of gender over the millennia. And in all continents, there was a talk of a third gender, male and female, and a third gender, people who are different. And they give sites for Native Americans who have the term two-spirit, which was very common and an honored position before the invasion of the Christian West, who taught them that that is an abomination.
Of course.
When it's absolutely normal from generation to generation, it just happens. It just happens. There's a minority of people who are just different. And we know we're different long before we know the name for that difference.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we as a society are taught to be lockstep with other people. You know, there's this conformity requirement. Children in school are taught that, you know, to conform, and if you don't, you'll be ostracized. Mm-hmm. And so that is really implanted in us very deeply. And certainly I was a student of that school of thought, and there were times where I got close to breaking free, but it was fear, the fear that I would be alone, that I think really when we talk about conformity, that's what it's really all about, is that people don't want to be alone. And you conform so that your friends will go to the mall with you. That's right. What kids do today. And, you know, and if you're alone, if you don't conform, you're going to be sitting somewhere by yourself. And I certainly didn't want to be that way. And I also, you know, did not want to be ostracized. And certainly when I grew up, you know, beat up. I mean, that would be part of what would have happened to me.
Right. I guess I became such a bookworm because I was different. I couldn't gang up with the other girls at my high school. They were talking about the date they'd had, you know, and I did not date. But anyway, that's another. Mm-hmm. It's a sad problem.
It is.
But
although maybe today, because people are more open and society is more accepting of differences, you know, maybe it's not as hard today.
I think so. That's true.
You know, I mean, I have great hope for these generations, the teens and the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings, because I believe that our future, the future of our country in terms of tolerance and acceptance and all of those big words, you know, really rests with them. You know, it's the people who are in their late 30s and 40s and 50s who are transgendered, and even 60s, you know, who, I mean, I just got a post a couple of months ago about somebody in his 60s who finally came out as male to female after he retired, you know, and God love him, but he was so happy. And I understand that. I understand how you can finally be unified. And people, I think, Elsie, who are not torn, people who don't have to worry about compartmentalizing who they are versus who they have to appear to be, I think it's very hard for them to understand about being torn inside.
Right.
That every day you wake up with this voice that speaks to you, not that we're, schizophrenic, but that there's something that's inside you, your soul speaking to you or whatever, that is telling you, you need to live your life as who you are. And I think that what happens, is that we get torn, we think that it'll go away, and we know it won't go away.
No.
It'll never go away.
No.
And thank God, that I realized, certainly I wouldn't want 9/11 to happen again, of course, but
No.
at least thank God I finally realized it.
I don't know how many people listen to Barbara Walters' interviews all the time.
I do sometimes.
But apparently some years ago she had on her program a family. This couple had 4 children. And their youngest child said to them, "I'm a girl, not a boy." And this child insisted on wearing a dress. She would unfasten the snaps on her panties when she
You mean her
make a
jeans?
little suit.
Okay.
She would unfasten the snaps so it would hang like a dress. And she said, "I'm a girl." Well, they were pretty surprised, and they thought it's a phase, will pass. The dad said he was just worried that his child would get beat up.
Mm-hmm.
And the mother was concerned that the child be happy. And the child would come to them, ran into their bedroom one night and said, "Oh, Mommy, I've had this bad nightmare. I had grown up and I had a beard and a mustache like Daddy. And that's wrong, I'm a girl." And it also reports that she would tell her folks, "I prayed and prayed and prayed that this thing I don't need would go away." And she was referring to the penis, that she said, I don't need that. Because she had brothers and a sister, and she knew the physical difference between boys and girls. And she says, "I'm wrong, I'm a girl."
And then did her parents finally come around?
Oh, they came around right away. They took her to a pediatrician who said, "Listen to your child."
Well, God love that pediatrician, because not all of them would do that.
Right.
But she is so lucky. She's lucky because she understood right away,
Right.
and she had loving parents who, were supportive of her.
Right.
Thank God for her. That's great.
And they say the problem, and one day she insisted on wearing a one-piece swimming suit into their swimming pool. So they said that's when our girl came out to the whole neighborhood, that she is a girl. And they took her to school as a girl in a dress. And the doctors have told them they're reluctant to do any hormone therapy or surgery until the child is older. But I can't see any clearer case. The child from infancy insisting that there's been a mistake, Mommy, I'm a girl.
Well, the best question that I ever got in therapy now, and I've been to, several different therapists. I have 4 or 5. But the best question I ever got was from a therapist in Minneapolis who asked me, when you were in 1st or 2nd grade and the gym teacher had all the students, the boys and the girls, in the gym class, and the gym teacher said, all the girls line up on one side, and all the boys line up on the other side of the gym. Where did you want to go? And to be honest, I said, well, at that point in my life, I was going over with the boys. And you know, even though I had some identity issues at that point, they weren't as fully developed as this little girl that you just spoke about. That's why she is so lucky. She would have led the charge to the girls' side of the gym. But this is relatively rare that somebody has such an overwhelming gender identity that's different than their biological identity so early at an age, because I think for most people it is a gradual, incremental process. Again, because in our society, you know, you're born with a penis, you're a boy. You're born with a vagina, you're a girl. And what do you mean that you feel that might not be right?
Yeah.
You know, so.
Right, and the child was extremely lucky that the parents were up to date with not insisting that she snap those pants back together.
Absolutely.
And that she always wear boy clothes.
Absolutely.
She's very, very lucky that she was allowed to grow like that.
Very much so. I
Very
agree.
lucky. It's something that society needs to wrap its mind around, that there are people that are different and we're still okay in all our differences.
We are.
So it was quite an interesting story. I'm a Girl article about understanding transgender children. And there's also a site that, let me see, Kate Bernstein, transsexual author, playwright.
Who was recently at Iowa. Yep, she came and spoke at Iowa.
Did she?
Yep, over, I believe during the summer or in the fall, last year.
Last year, at the university?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it says she's a transsexual author, playwright, performance artist, and gender theorist. And I'm sure if we would have asked some of the professors from the university to join our interview, we could have heard some more comments about transgender people in the local area,
Mm-hmm.
on campus. There was a transgender person in, I think, the economics department.
Deidre, yes. I don't remember her last name, but her first name was Deidre.
Deidre.
And she, I believe, is still teaching, but in Chicago.
In Chicago, because there was sort of a difficulty with acceptance here.
Well, and
uncomfortable.
Well, and that follows the pattern that I talked about, which is where it's very difficult for people, many people, to not see the ghost. And even in my case, you know, I'm closing my law practice and I'm moving to Minneapolis because I need to go to a place where people only know me as Ellen.
Right.
And they don't know me as who I was as a boy. Professionally, I have to tell you that the bar, the Iowa State Bar, the attorneys, and the judges have been phenomenal, exceedingly supportive and accepting, very much so. And so I am very grateful to all of them. The problem is friends and family,
Right.
and just being able to create a new start, because where I am in Iowa, everybody knows me by my old name. You know, in my law practice, even though my colleagues have been very wonderful, my law practice really is associated with my boy persona.
Right.
And, you know, it's just one of those things with transgenders. So, yes, very often we have to move away from where we were. and go and get a fresh start.
Even a new neighborhood.
A new neighborhood, yes.
So we expect the judges and the bar, other lawyers, to know about civil rights and to know about acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the general public needs some education, and that's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much, Ellen, for coming.
Thank you for having me, Elsie.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, hon.